was shocked a little bit when I heard myself introduced as a politician. Always makes me nervous. I seem to have a history of choosing hated professions. I was a lawyer in my past profession, and when I went into politics, I went into an even more hated profession. In order to be any more hated, I might have to be a door-to-door insurance salesman or a used car salesman or something like that. But perhaps the next career I should be the flower delivery guy, or maybe the pizza guy. Everybody's always happy to see him or her. It really is a pleasure to be with you. I believe strongly in this cause. This is the issue of our time. This is an issue that has matured to the point that it's ready for action. We here in Utah, the people in Utah and our government in Utah, have a certain understanding that the time is right to change the way we operate with our public lands. We understand that we all benefit from public lands. We understand that people across the country benefit from them. But we, in a state like Utah, where the federal government owns 2/3 of the land, also understand that we're bearing a disproportionate burden to confer a benefit on people in other states where they know nothing about our problems. Do you know how much land the federal government owns in the state of New York? Less than 1/2 of 1% of the land in the state of New York is owned by the federal government. It's not fair that we own 2/3 of it. Let me tell you what that does. As a result of the fact that they own 2/3 of our land, we have to go to them to ask for permission to access our own land. We can't tax that land. And as a result, we struggle to fund everything from fire services, police services, our schools, simply because of the fact that we can't tax most of our land. We rank dead last in the entire nation in terms of per student school funding. One of the reasons for this is that we can't tax most of our land. In some of our counties, like Kane County, that has commissioners here today representing that great part of the state, it's more than 90% of the land that's owned by the federal government. They can't tax it. Now, let me give you an example and ask you a question. Would we be okay if any individual or corporation or other entity owned more than, say, 5 or 10% of the land in our state? We might be worried, right? In fact, if somebody owns that much of the land in the state, we might worry that that individual or that corporation or entity would exert too much control over our economy. That landowner would be able to block access to a lot of people who would have difficulty getting to their land. And that particular landowner might do a lot to mess with our economy. But what happens when it's not 5 or 10%, but 2/3 of the land? And what happens when that landowner isn't an individual or a corporation, but a sovereign government that says, oh, by the way, you can't tax any of that land? That creates a much, much bigger problem. These problems affect everyday, ordinary Utahns, many of whom have heroic stories to tell you. Let me tell you about one of these heroes. There's a young man named Logan Dalton. He lives in south central Utah in a rural community. He wrote me a letter a few months back. He wrote me a letter telling me a story about his grandpa. He's worried about the fact that his grandpa couldn't get back to where their cattle were grazing, riding his horse. That federal land managers had told him, you may not ride your horse on this trail to get to your own cattle. And he said, the problem we have is unless my grandpa can ride his horse to get to the cattle, he can't make it back there to oversee them because he's old and he has emphysema. So fortunately in that instance, I was able to, through my office, work with federal land managers to make sure that Logan's grandpa's permit was secure, that he could ride his horse on that federal land. But we shouldn't have to do this every time. We shouldn't have to ask Mother May I in order to tap into the rich natural resources that we have in our state. We shouldn't have to ask Mother May I in order to undertake reasonable recreational activities in our state. We shouldn't have to ask Mother May I every time we want to engage in environmentally responsible energy production in our state. More to the point, if we're going to delegate the responsibility to own and manage and maintain that much of our land, why would we ever do so to an organization that, like the U.S. government, has accumulated $16.5 trillion of debt, is accumulating new debt at a rate of more than $1 trillion every single year, and quite frankly, doesn't manage the land it has all that well? Am I making sense on that point? And so as we confront the challenges of our time, the need that we have to educate our children here in Utah well, as we confront the challenges that we face from Washington, like budget sequestration, which threatens to undermine our ability to provide for our national defense, as we confront all of these many challenges, why would we want to continue the status quo of complete federal ownership of 2/3 of our state, and at the same time shut out all the energy production opportunities, all the recreational opportunities that are currently foreclosed to us? We don't want that. We need to have a dialogue, a national dialogue, that allows us to come together as Republicans and Democrats, as conservatives and liberals, where we say we're going to utilize that which is properly ours, and most importantly, we need to figure out, to the extent we're going to have public land, which I think most of us agree we should have public land, who manages it? Who pays for it? And who suffers from the burden associated with it? It's not fair that residents of our state should bear the burden and not have any of that burden borne by the people of New York, for example. They're great people, but so are we, and we ought to benefit the same way that they do. At the end of the day, we've got to realize that this is an issue that is neither Democratic nor Republican. It is neither liberal nor conservative. It is simply an American issue. This is our time. This is our moment. Let's not shun the fight. Let's keep working toward a solution that will benefit all Utahns and all Americans. May God bless the sovereign state of Utah. May God bless America. Thank you very much.